56-year-old waiter said quietly, his tone polite but firm. My mother once had a ring just like that one. Instantly, the noise in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant faded into silence. Richard Blackstone, a 62-year-old real estate tycoon worth billions, froze. The young man standing before him had just served his $1,200 glass of wine. The ring on Richard's hand was unmistakable, a Burmese ruby surrounded by diamonds, handcrafted in 1942. Only two of them had ever existed. That's impossible, Richard muttered, feeling his pulse race. Devon, the waiter, whose name tag gleamed under the chandelier light, kept his professional smile, but his eyes held something deeper, a calm too unsettling to ignore. He'd only worked there 3 months, but Devon knew every detail about the regular guests, especially the man who sat at table 17 every Wednesday. Always alone, always proud, always treating others as if they were invisible. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Devon said lightly, though there was an edge in his tone. My mother always said she got her ring from her old employer. A very generous man. Richard's fingers tightened around his napkin until the fabric tore. His heart pounded as old memories surfaced. Memories he had buried for decades. The second ring, the one he had given to the young housekeeper back in 1995. The one that should have vanished with her. Devon watched every flicker of emotion cross the billionaire's face. The sweat on his tanned forehead, the forced composure of a man whose past was catching up to him. Does your mother still have the ring? Richard asked, trying to sound casual. She did, Devon corrected softly. For the first time, his smile wavered. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. She couldn't afford proper treatment. The words hit like a hammer. Richard knew exactly who Devon's mother was and what he had done to her. Devon adjusted his tray with quiet precision. Can I get you anything else, sir? Maybe a photo of my mother? She kept a few from when she worked for important people. Richard's eyes widened. This wasn't coincidence. This was calculated. A confrontation wrapped in politeness, justice served cold. That won't be necessary, Richard said, voice cracking. Devon nodded calmly. Of course, sir. I'll be nearby if you change your mind. Some stories deserve to be told, don't they? As he walked away, Richard's gaze followed him, shaken, paranoid, and aware that something bigger had just begun. Devon's plan, 2 years in the making, was finally in motion. And the best part? Richard still had no idea how deep this story went. If this tale of truth and courage already gives you chills, don't forget to subscribe and comment your thoughts below. Because what Devon uncovered about his mother's past and what he's about to do next will leave you absolutely speechless. It wasn't the polite smile Devon wore inside the restaurant. This time, it was something far more dangerous. Funny thing about memory, he said quietly. My mother remembered everything, especially the night you gave her that ring, December 1995. Grace Williams had been cleaning the study when she overheard Richard Blackstone shouting on the phone, furious about missing documents and officials asking too many questions. She froze behind the curtain, listening as he mentioned forged papers and payments to certain city inspectors. When he turned and saw her there, a young woman clutching a cleaning rag, his expression turned cold as stone. How much did you hear? He demanded, stepping closer. Nothing, sir, Grace whispered. I was just cleaning. They both knew it was a lie. Your mother was a discreet woman, Blackstone said now, forcing a careful smile. She respected her employer's privacy. Devon's laugh was soft but sharp. That's an interesting way to describe someone who was threatened if she ever spoke about what she saw. The memory hit Blackstone like a wave. He remembered the ruby ring, not as a gift, but as a warning. This is worth more than you'll make in 10 years, he had told her. But if you repeat anything you heard tonight, you and your baby will disappear. Grace had taken the ring with trembling hands, not out of greed, but out of fear. She had stayed silent, left the city, and raised her child alone. 3 jobs, constant fear, endless exhaustion. She always said, the truth has a way of finding daylight, even after years of darkness. Look, son, Blackstone said, trying to regain control. I don't know what stories your mother told you, but I can make it right. A better job. $50,000. We can forget this whole thing. Devin tilted his head. 50,000, he repeated. His tone was calm, but his eyes burned. You know, my mother died owing 230,000 in medical bills. The treatment she needed wasn't covered. So no, 50,000 doesn't sound right. It sounds insulting. Cold sweat trickled down Blackstone's neck. This young man wasn't desperate. He was deliberate. Every word, every pause, every look was part of something much larger. Fine, Blackstone said. 100,000. Final offer. Devin shook his head slowly. You still don't get it. This was never about money. Then what do you want? Justice, Devin said simply. For 29 years, my mother lived in fear. She ran every time she thought you'd found her, worked herself to death because she couldn't use a reference from your mansion. She tried to tell her story, you know, once to a reporter who dropped it overnight, once to a lawyer whose office got robbed a week later. She realized what she was up against. She died believing you were untouchable. He stepped closer, his voice steady. But the world's changed, Mr. Blackstone. People like you aren't invisible anymore. Blackstone's composure cracked. Careful, kid. I've got lawyers who could ruin your life with one call. Devin smiled again, the same cold, unshakable smile from earlier. I'm sure you do, he said, but I have something they can't buy. Oh yeah? What's that? Devin's answer sent a chill through him. Patience, he said, and a plan that took 2 years to complete. He turned and walked away, leaving the billionaire standing alone on the empty sidewalk, the city lights reflecting off the cursed ruby ring. At his mother's grave, Devin had made a promise that one day the truth would speak for her. Grace Williams had died in silence, but her son had inherited her courage and her memory of injustice. What Richard Blackstone didn't know was that every second of their conversation had been recorded, every threat, every bribe, every lie. And that was only the first move in a game he had already lost. Within 2 weeks, the pressure began. Blocked calls in the middle of the night, unmarked cars waiting outside Devin's apartment, attempts to scare him into silence. But this time, the silence wouldn't win. The next wave of pressure wasn't physical. It was professional. A quiet conversation between Richard Blackstone and the restaurant owner about problem employees who could hurt the establishment's image. But Devin had learned something powerful from his mother, Grace Williams. Patience is the sharpest weapon of all. Every new act of intimidation only confirmed one thing. Blackstone was losing control. It was a rainy Thursday when a voice interrupted Devin as he waited for the bus. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, the man said. Devin turned. A well-dressed stranger in his 40s stood there, calm but calculating. You must be Richard Blackstone, Devin said evenly. The man smiled faintly. Michael Harrison, I'm Mr. Blackstone's attorney, and I can assure you, you don't want this reaching a courtroom. Devin's trademark smile appeared, quiet, unsettling. Court? He repeated. Who said anything about court? I only mentioned my mother's ring. Harrison studied him carefully. There was something off about this young man. Too calm, too deliberate. Not the reaction of someone desperate or frightened. My client is willing to make a final offer, the lawyer said finally. $250,000. You sign a confidentiality agreement and everyone walks away. Interesting, Devin said, pretending to think. But I have a counteroffer. Harrison raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Nothing, Devin replied. Absolutely nothing. Because this was never about money, Mr. Harrison. It's about something your client lost long ago. Something he'll never buy back. And what's that? Devin's smile deepened. Peaceful sleep. The bus pulled up. Devin stepped aboard, leaving the attorney standing in the rain. Confused, uneasy, and for the first time afraid. This wasn't the behavior of someone who could be silenced. What neither Harrison nor Blackstone knew was that Devin wasn't working alone. 3 months before taking the restaurant job, he'd reached out to someone who knew exactly how to deal with men like Richard Blackstone. Her name was Jessica Chun, Assistant District Attorney for the Southern District of New York, a specialist in corruption and financial crime. More importantly, she had met Grace Williams. Your mother came to my office in 2018, Jessica said during their first meeting. She had documents, dates, even names. Everything we needed to open an investigation. Then why didn't you? Devin asked. Because 48 hours later, our main witness, a former employee ready to confirm her story, died in a car crash. 2 others vanished completely. After that, there was nothing we could do. Devin's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Things are different now. They are, Jessica agreed. Since the Panama leaks, financial transparency laws, public pressure, Blackstone's no longer untouchable. He's vulnerable. It was Jessica who trained Devin to gather proof, to record everything. Every bribe, every threat, every whisper of intimidation. He's acting exactly as we expected, Jessica said later, reviewing the recordings from the restaurant. Arrogant, reckless, creating new crimes to bury the old ones. How long do we need? Devin asked. 2 more weeks, Jessica replied. There's a federal audit of his companies next month. If we present clear evidence of extortion before then, it could open a full criminal case. Devin nodded, but part of his mind was already elsewhere. Official justice mattered, but there were debts only personal justice could settle. 2 days later, Devin's phone rang at work. Devin Williams? Yes. This is Theodore Blackstone. Devin froze. That name carried weight. I'm Richard's son, the voice continued, and I'd very much like to talk. They met in a quiet Brooklyn cafe. Theodore Blackstone was nothing like his father. Calm, compassionate, sincere. At 35, he had already walked away from the family empire once he discovered how it was truly built. My father doesn't know I'm calling, he said, but I've known about Grace Williams for years. Devin leaned forward. How? Because I hired investigators, Theodore explained, when I began to suspect where our fortune really came from. They found evidence of at least 6 families, people who were silenced or scared into disappearing. He slid a folder across the table. These, Theodore said, sliding a folder across the table, are copies of documents I found in my father's office. Forged contracts, payment records, messages about how to silence witnesses. Devin opened the folder. His pulse quickened. Page after page, name after name, decades of corruption, mapped out with surgical precision. Why are you giving this to me? He asked quietly. Theodore looked him straight in the eye. Because justice delayed isn't justice denied. And because I want my son to know that when it came time to choose between family and what's right, I chose what's right. That night, Devin called Jessica with just 5 words. We just won the game. But even as he organized the evidence that would end Richard Blackstone's empire, Devin knew the story wasn't over. Because some debts can't be settled with a prison sentence or bankruptcy. Some require something far deeper, the complete destruction of the illusion the guilty man built his life on. And for 2 years, Devin had planned exactly that. While Blackstone slept soundly in his mansion, convinced he was dealing with yet another young man who could be bought or scared off, Devin was finalizing every detail of the night that would bring the truth crashing down around him. Official justice would be the appetizer. The real course would be personal. Wednesday evening, the annual Elite Charity Gala, Manhattan's grandest event, 300 guests, $5,000 tickets, cameras from every major network. And as always, Richard Blackstone had purchased an entire table, basking in the glow of politicians, cameras, and admiration. He shook hands, smiled for photos, and spoke about social responsibility, the very words that once hid a lifetime of deceit. Among the catering staff, one new face went unnoticed, a quiet man in a crisp uniform, tray in hand. Champagne, Mr. Blackstone. Blackstone turned. His smile vanished. Standing before him was Devin Williams. The blood drained from the billionaire's face. What on earth are you doing here? Devin's tone was calm. Working, he said. Just like my mother did, the night you threatened her. The table went silent. The mayor, the executives, everyone froze. Blackstone's jaw tightened. Security, he barked. Devin lifted one hand in peace. There's no need for that, sir. I only came to return something that belongs to you. He placed a sealed envelope on the table, right in front of the cameras still broadcasting live. Inside were copies of everything. Theodore's documents, Jessica's recordings, and every bribe and threat captured over the past few weeks. You once said every man has his price, Devin said evenly. But you never asked what the price of justice is. Blackstone tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. As his eyes scanned the pages, the color drained from his face. 30 years of deception, exposed in front of the world. Every payment, every cover-up, every ruined life, laid bare. Where did you get this? He whispered. Devin met his gaze. From your own son, Theodore has a conscience you never had. The entire ballroom fell silent. Reporters and cameras turned toward the table, and that's when Jessica Chun walked in, flanked by 4 federal agents. Richard Blackstone, she announced clearly, you are under arrest for extortion, bribery, financial fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. The sound of handcuffs echoed through the hall. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. Blackstone's voice broke as he looked around the room. This is a mistake. I have lawyers. I have connections. Devin stepped closer, his calm unshaken. Do you know the difference between us, Mr. Blackstone? Blackstone glared up, defeated. You always believed power meant taking what you wanted from people who couldn't fight back, Devin said. But I learned that real power is using the truth against those who think they're untouchable. Blackstone's last attempt at defiance was almost a whisper. You think this brings her back? You think this changes anything? Devin's expression softened, not in anger, but in peace. No, he said quietly, but it finally lets her rest. As the billionaire was led out under the bright flashes of cameras, Devin stood still, a quiet figure in a server's uniform, finally watching the empire that destroyed his mother crumble before the world. No, Devin said quietly, his voice calm yet firm. It won't bring my mother back, but it will make sure no other mother endures what she did. And sometimes, that's enough. As Richard Blackstone was led away in handcuffs, Devin turned toward the cameras still broadcasting live. My name is Devin Williams, he said clearly. My mother's name was Grace Williams. For 29 years, she lived in fear of a man who thought he was above the law. Today, we prove that no one is. The event host whispered something about cutting the live feed, but it was far too late. The clip was already spreading like wildfire across social media. Within minutes, millions had seen it. Amid the chaos, Theodore Blackstone stepped forward. Thank you, he said softly, for doing what I never had the courage to do. Devin nodded. And thank you for giving me the tools to do this the right way. Around them, the glittering guests murmured and glanced at each other, each one desperate to distance themselves from the fallen billionaire whose reputation had just collapsed on live television. Devin reached into his pocket and handed Jessica Chun a small device. Today's conversation, he said. He tried to bribe me again just before you arrived. Jessica shook her head, half in disbelief, half in admiration. You recorded everything. My mother used to say, the truth always finds its way out, Devin replied. I just had to give it a little help. In the hours that followed, the ripple became a wave. 3 other victims of Richard Blackstone came forward, emboldened by Devin's courage. Families that had been silent for decades finally had a voice. By morning, Blackstone's empire began to crumble in real time. Stock prices plummeted, business partners cut ties, and federal investigations multiplied. That night, as Devin walked through the quiet streets of Manhattan, the city lights reflecting in the rain, he passed a newsstand. The headline across the front page read, Billionaire arrested live, son exposes own father. Devin bought a copy, not out of pride, but to make sure Grace Williams' story was finally being told the way it deserved to be. On the front page, his photo appeared beside hers. Mother and son, 2 generations united by justice. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about transformation, turning pain into purpose, fear into courage, and silence into change. 6 months later, Devin sat in an office overlooking Central Park, not as an employee, but as the founder of the Grace Williams Foundation. Created from the funds recovered from Blackstone's frozen assets, it had already helped 43 families who had faced corporate intimidation and abuse of power. Richard Blackstone, once a symbol of influence, now awaited trial in a federal prison, abandoned by his so-called allies, forgotten by the world he once ruled. His lawyers had negotiated his bail down to $50 million, but with every account frozen, He couldn't touch a cent. Ironic, isn't it? Jessica said one afternoon during a foundation meeting. He spent his life buying loyalty, and when he needed real friends, he realized money can't buy integrity. Theodore had taken charge of the remaining family businesses. He introduced ethical reforms, compensation programs for victims, and transparency policies unheard of in the company's history. Some fortunes, Theodore said during a press conference, must be rebuilt from the ground up, with honesty this time. The case became a landmark in modern law. Prosecutors in multiple states adopted the new legal framework Jessica and Devin had pioneered to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. The media called it the Williams Doctrine. Devin no longer worked in restaurants, but he kept a framed photo of the old staff on his desk. Some of his former co-workers now worked at the foundation. Others had gone on to build new lives. With recommendation letters Devin personally wrote. 3 months after the trial began, a 60-year-old woman named Patricia Johnson walked into the foundation. Her story was heartbreakingly familiar. Intimidation, silence, decades of fear. But this time, someone listened. At the first hearing of the Johnson case, Devin stood before the court and spoke with calm conviction. "My mother died believing she was alone in this fight. Today, no family has to face this battle alone." As for Richard Blackstone, he tried one last desperate move, but for the first time in his life, no one was listening. Devin watched the city skyline from his window, the light of dawn reflecting off the skyscrapers his mother once cleaned. And somewhere, in the quiet of his heart, he knew the promise had been kept. He tried one last desperate move, offering to expose other corrupt businessmen in exchange for a lighter sentence. But for the first time in his life, Richard Blackstone discovered that even his darkest secrets had lost their worth. The same elite he had once protected now treated him like a shadow from a past they wished to forget. Sentencing day. Devin sat quietly in the courtroom as the judge read the verdict. 25 years in federal prison. If Blackstone ever walked free again, he would be 87. Their eyes met one last time. Devin felt no anger, no triumph, only the calm of a man who had turned pain into purpose. "He wanted to know if I felt vindicated," Devin told Theodore afterward. "I told him revenge was too small a word. What I felt was justice, closure, proof that the system can work, if the right people have the courage to make it work." The Grace Williams Foundation grew faster than anyone imagined. Volunteer lawyers, retired investigators, journalists, all came together to fight for those who had been silenced by power and fear. Devin had found his true calling. He wasn't serving tables anymore. He was serving justice. A year after Blackstone's conviction, Devin stood at the podium of the law school his mother had once dreamed of attending. "Grace Williams never had the chance to stand in court," he told the graduates, "but she taught me something far greater, that justice isn't a privilege reserved for those with degrees. It's a responsibility carried by those with courage." In the foundation's main hall hung his mother's ring, displayed beneath a simple plaque. Grace Williams, 1976 to 2023. She taught us that enforced silence is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a fight carried forward by love. Richard Blackstone had once tried to use money and power to rewrite the truth. But in the end, he learned that some forces are stronger than wealth. Memory, justice, and the unwavering will of a son who refused to let his mother's legacy fade into silence. Devin Williams proved that the greatest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so strong, so good, that their cruelty becomes meaningless in comparison to the good you've created. He often thought of his mother's favorite saying as he looked out over Central Park from his office window. "My mom always said the truth has legs," Devin reflected. "Sometime it just needs someone brave enough to teach it how to run."